Welcome to the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. From 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners, as well as public radio listeners and future YouTube listeners. My name is Jerome, and I am the Sane Environmentalist. I guess I want to start out today with a pitch out to UCY.TV, a great organization. They provide us with a platform and a voice to get these messages out. And they depend upon our support. So please go to UCY.TV. You can shop through the Amazon link there, or you can simply make a PayPal donation. But if anything you can do to help out UCY.TV is going to be a good thing for all of us. So it's been an interesting week. This is my first week in Oregon, and it has been, well, a wonderful week, actually. My friend Lonnie Clark is a gem. She's a wonderful person. She is absolutely a beautiful individual. She's a true soldier for the earth and a true activist. You know, as well, I met another lady. Her name is Jen Hornaday, and she is a bee lady. She is a beekeeper, and I helped her move a beehive because I guess some people out in the country decided that now that they've legalized cannabis here in Oregon, that it is smarter and more profitable to grow cannabis than it is to grow orchards. And so they're ripping up a bunch of orchards and they're putting cannabis in there. Unfortunately, the people who are oftentimes are attendant with cannabis growing have a tendency to also drink beer and not be too careful about the environment. You know, I've grown marijuana a lot in my life, and a lot of my fellow marijuana growers have been responsible for quite a bit of damage to the ecosystem, including chemical fertilizer damage, pesticide damage, spraying damage, littering. You know, you go to some of these old pot plots out in the woods and you find piles of bags of potting soil and garbage and cups and cigarette butts and just all kinds of crap all over the place. Oftentimes they'll mess up the watershed by rediverting streams and that kind of thing. I'm not dissing my fellow cannabis growers, but if you grow cannabis, don't do it for the money. Because as soon as you start doing it for the money, then you stop caring about our Mother Earth and the effects that it could have on her. So at any rate, these cannabis people decided they didn't want honeybees on their property anymore. So we had to move the hive. Quite a healthy hive, by the way. A beehive, a commercial beehive, is composed of 4 boxes, frame boxes, and each frame box, they're about maybe 10 or 11 inches deep by 24 by 24. And inside of them are these cards. They just slide in, and they're just basically on the square wood. Come on, man. Come on. Am I even on? It looks like I might be on. I can't tell. Let me go to UCY online. This is frustrating. Skype frustrates me. It really, really, really does. So I'm going to log on to UCY and see if I hear my pretty voice. If I do, then I'm going to assume I'm okay. Listening. Come on. And there we go. Come on. All I hear is myself going, come on, cooperate with me. So at any rate, I don't know what just happened there. I apologize for that. But the hive had to move. And so basically we took the top half of the hive, stuck it in the pickup truck, taped it up so the bees couldn't get out, and drove it across town to another location. And bees are funny. There's a rule with bees. It's called the 3 foot or 3 miles. Between 3 feet and 3 miles, they'll get lost if you move their house. If you take a beehive and move it 4 feet to the left or the right from where it is, the bees will literally form into a swarm and then a ball right there where the old hive was, right next to the new hive, where the hive is now, and they will literally be lost. I mean, eventually they'll find their way back, and anywhere from 3 feet all the way up to 3 miles, they'll be lost. But for whatever reason, once you go past that 3 mile mark, all of a sudden the bees just realize, and they geolocate somehow on the new nest, and they fly right there. Isn't it amazing? Aren't bees just a wonderful thing? I think they're just wonderful. So I'm assuming that I'm on this call. Yes, I am. I can see that now. Good. So, and I'm assuming my mic is on. Good. Everything's fine. So, at any rate, because of this, we had to move half of the hive at once so that they wouldn't get lost. Because if we grabbed the hive and took the whole thing in the middle of the day and took it less than 3 miles, which we did, then all the bees that are foraging would come back to the hive and they wouldn't be able to find it, and they wouldn't be able to re-find it only a half a mile or a mile away, and so they would end up freezing to death that night. Very sad situation. So yeah, bees are kind of magical that way. The only other way to do that, they say, is you put a bunch of sticks and branches and brush in front of the opening of the hive, and the bees have got to climb through all that stuff to get out, and that causes them to automatically reset their geolocation. And so if you put sticks and stuff in front of the hive, and then the bees all are out, and then you move the hive to a new location, then the bees will be able to find it, even if it's less than 3 miles away. So you could put sticks in front of the thing, move it in the morning or the night before, and then once the bees are out foraging, you could move it 4 feet, remove the sticks, and the bees would be able to find their new home 4 feet away this time because of the sticks, because they were forced to do their geolocation routine upon leaving the hive. So, what a magical creature. As well, the honey. I've been eating honey, I'm 50 some odd years old, and I've been eating honey for a long, long time. And honey's always been pretty good. It's very sweet, syrupy, and that's about it. It just kind of tastes like, sweet. And I never really enjoyed it that much. I got a taste of the honey from these bees, and I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. I took it into my finger, ate some of it, and the first taste that I got wasn't sweet, which is what's surprising, because I would consider honey to be just particularly sweet first, but it wasn't. What I tasted was flowers. I tasted roses and just blossoms. It tasted like I was eating a flower that was then not even that much, but a little sweet. It was sweet, but it wasn't like overloaded, just like the store honey's sweet. Amazing. It tasted more like a rose than anything. Just amazing. Bees are, once again, amazing. And the lady, Jen Hornaday, has a project she calls Healthy Bees for Healthy Gardens. And I think that you can go to her website. Let me check and make sure it's good. At HEAL, Healthy Bees, Healthy Gardens. It's a long URL. It's there. healthybeeshealthygardens.com. So this is her website. And there's a picture of her right there with all her various different types of honey. Really, a wonderful thing, and I'm so fortunate that I was able to get involved with bees, and that just yet another aspect of environmental awareness. Even though they're a farmed product, so to speak, there's really not enough wild ones left to do the job anymore. That's why people that have big orchards and whatnot oftentimes have to literally rent bees, or they don't get fruit. And the saddest part is the bee rental is like $150, $200 to pollinate an entire orchard. So, the beekeepers will take their hives and move them to the middle of the orchard and let the bees do their thing. And then after a couple of weeks, they grab them once they're done blossoming and move them out. And if you think of the amount of money you make off of an orchard full of fruit, $250 is a pretty cheap price to pay to ensure the pollination of all of the fruit in your orchard, or 90% of it, let's say. So we need to preserve the bees. We need to understand the bees. We need to be patient with bees. We need to understand that bees are not mean critters. Bees are actually quite sweet. They've got one job, and that is protect the queen and help raise the babies. And anybody who gets in the way of that job, well, they're going to be dealt with so that they're not an issue anymore. And it's sad that in order to defend the hive, a bee must literally kill itself. It must literally stick its stinger in you, and when it does, it rips out of its body, and then the bee goes and dies. That's a sacrifice, unlike any human could ever think about doing, especially without even thinking twice about it. Imagine if you had a sword attached to your arm and you ran it into something, but the only way to get your arm back was to rip it off, and then you had to die, but you defended the motherland. That is the ultimate nobility, in my opinion. So let us protect our bees. I encourage you to go to healthybeeshealthygardens.com, and there's a support us link, and you can make a donation. And she even sells like honey stickers and stuff. So she sells these cool signs, I think. Let me see here. Yes, spraying stickers and signs. No spraying, please. I love bees. Give bees a chance. Be friendly. No spraying. So a big thing. And her honey is $15.50 for a pound. And $12.50 for 12 ounces. And you can get a discount to anyone who signs a bee-friendly pledge. And I'm going to look and see what that is. All right, the pledge is, I support the Friends of Healthy Bees campaign for bee-friendly, pesticide-free gardens. It says in Lane County, but we can spread that out to the entire planet. So, yeah, healthy bees equals healthy gardens, folks. Remember that. So next on the agenda, since I've been here for 2 weeks now, we have taken 2 trips to the coast of Oregon. The first trip was 2 Sundays ago, and the second trip was last Sunday. 2 Sundays ago, we went to Hecata Beach in Oregon, and we found, we did a tide pool investigation. Lonnie Clark and I and Kevin Finnegan all went down to the tide pools, and we searched around the tide pools looking for anemones, sea stars, whatever we could find. And we literally did not find anything on Hecata Beach. There was no life forms on Hecata Beach, not even birds. There weren't even any birds. The YouTube videos I made of it, quite a few people who know the beach were like, well, where's all the bird footprints? Where are the birds? My question is, yeah, good point. Where are the birds? Why would the birds go away? Why wouldn't there be a bunch of birds there? It's not like they're all dead. Think about that. I think that there's no birds there because, quite frankly, there's no food for the birds. They aren't going to go somewhere where there's no food. The beach did not even have a fishy smell. I don't know how many of you have gone to the ocean, opened the car door, and that first rush of air in the door of the car is like, fish. Fish, salt. Wow, that's the ocean. Okay. I got the salt part, but I did not get the fish part on Hecata Beach that day. We don't know. Maybe it's a seasonal thing. Maybe it's this time of year there isn't a lot of tide pool activity and life in tide pools going on. So we walked away with it like that. As well, we went up to Amanda's statue, and you can Google these places. Amanda's statue is I guess I could call it a shrine to an old blind Native American woman who got dragged across the rocks barefooted on a quest trek north to go to a reservation after she was captured down here. And she was barefooted and going over this volcanic rock on the beach, along the beach. And it got so bad that she her feet were bleeding to the point where they could track her from the blood on the ground from her feet. Really kind of a sad story there. But nobody knows what happened to her. They quit being able to track her all of a sudden. So maybe she got some shoes. Who knows? But the thing that I found disturbing about the whole thing, besides the fact that many of our ancestors are real jerks to the local native populations, was that the forest along the Oregon coast there, literally like a quarter of a mile from the ocean, was strangely silent. I mean, if nobody was talking and you were by yourself, you would only hear a little bit of a whispering of trees from the wind. No birds, no insects buzzing around. I did not see any insects or birds in that forest that day at all. Enough to where it concerned me. It's like this is a beautiful, deep, old-growth forest. There should be some birds here. Why aren't there? And I encourage you guys to go to my YouTube channel and look at some of the videos of this stuff and see for yourself. The forest there is absolutely stunningly, incredibly beautiful and green. But there's nothing there but the green. And as well, I noticed of the leafy species, like ferns, things that don't die every year, other bushes, there were strange burns, I guess you could say, like something had sprayed on or splashed on the leaves of them. Dead areas where the leaves just died. I actually collected a couple leaves and brought them home, thinking I should send them to a lab for some kind of chemical testing, but it looks like the rain itself is poisoning the plants a little bit. It's very sad. And that was the first week's visit. I posted those YouTube videos up, got a good amount of response from it. Even had one person accuse me of being Kevin Blanche and spreading propaganda. I don't know. How do you define propaganda? Propaganda is news or information designed to it's like a lie, that's saying it's the truth, and I wish that I could say that Hecate Beach did indeed have a bunch of life on it. But it didn't. I think we found one sea anemone, sickly looking one, and we found one little fish that was kind of a mud skipper, I guess you could call it. It kind of squishes itself down into the sand on the bottom. Very small, maybe an inch long. So that was kind of a beautiful day, a wonderful day, and a sad day. So then we went back last week because we're like, all right, we're going to make an investigation of this. And this time we spent more actual time at the beach. We went to the Devil's Churn, and we went to another beach, and gosh, I just forgot the name of it, but it's right literally next door to the Devil's Churn. So the Devil's Churn is this gash, if you will, in the rock formations of the coast there. And what happens is the ocean comes in and mashes into the rocks there, and basically it's cutting a big giant V into the earth right there, into the coastline. And it makes these big giant waves. But all around the Devil's Churn, there are quite a few tide pools. And so I got my camera and all that, and did the tide pools. And also, by the way, I did thorough, as best I could, radiation testing the first Sunday with my Geiger counter. And I did not detect any kind of a real increase above point. It was 0.08 to 0.12 microsieverts per hour, which would be considered, even though it's not good, background levels of radiation. Well within acceptable safety standards. Definitely within a level where you're not going to kill everything around if it's that radioactive. So basically, we know at least I believe it was not radiation that killed everything, or if indeed everything did get killed on Hecate Beach, and that this must have been going on for quite a lot longer than just this week. So, I actually tend to consider runoff of not only fertilizers but pesticides to be a big issue with the oceans, as well as the radioactivity spewing out of every power plant that resides along the ocean, which is most of them. They can't separate tritium, okay? Tritium, which is highly radioactive, but unfortunately has a fairly short half-life, is H3. It's hydrogen. And so they can't separate it out because it becomes water. It oxidizes and becomes heavy water, basically, tritiated water. And you cannot separate it, and so you just have to let it go. They could hold it somewhere until the tritium decays and then release it, but no, they just dump it. There's certain acceptable levels. So, you know what? I honestly don't think that's the cause of it. Fukushima could not have helped that, but it seems to me that that's an ongoing, longer-term issue. So then we came back a week later, okay, and this time, like I said, we went to the Devil's Churn. The Devil's Churn is very much a beautiful place, and there was life there. Yay. I found sea anemones, green ones, quite a few of them, and a few mussels here and there, the full-size big mussels, not the little blue California mussels. No sea stars, though, not even one, the whole day, and we searched. We went up and down probably 10 coastline miles, checking tide pools and whatnot, and we did not find even a single sea star. I think a sea star is a harbinger species. When you start losing them, then before long, you have Hecate Beach. So that was a sad trip, but beautiful, and the company could not have been better. I love Lonnie Clark. I think she's my hero in so many different ways. She really is. So, I can say with some assurity that the coastlines of the United States, at least the Pacific Northwest, are in distress. There's no doubt in my mind. What can we do about that? I don't know. Why is it happening? I don't know. But it is happening, and it is probably our fault. So, all the things we're doing with the nuclear, with growing our food, with our carbon footprints, is literally and radically changing life on Earth as we know it. And I've thought about this a lot. I've thought, well, what's the solution? How do we at least slow this down or stop it? And I came to the realization that if you look at it as a global problem, not as a local problem, I myself can do things personally to reduce my impact on the environment. I can recycle. I don't drive a car, and so I don't emit too much carbon dioxide above and beyond what a normal animal would. I do emit a lot of carbon dioxide with my diet. I eat beef. You know, that's a huge carbon source right there. And a source of deforestation. You know, and I realize that all over the world there's more and more and more and more people, and our population is growing exponentially. We're growing exponentially, and so our need for resources as well is growing exponentially. So there's no way out of it. I don't see a way out of it. As long as we continue to have more humans on this planet, we're going to need to burn more fossil fuels to provide the energy to keep those humans going. And we're going to need to grow more cows and more grain to feed the cows in order to feed those humans. And it's my belief, and a sad one at that humanity is going to burn every single drop of oil that we can find. As well, we're going to burn every single pound of coal that we can find. It's going to happen that way. Even if humanity had the will, we just don't have the ability. You know, let's say, for instance, they made coal illegal tomorrow. Nobody can burn coal for anything. It's got to stay right in the ground. You can't even mine it. Well, that would shut down how many power plants? All of a sudden, we'd have a huge issue. People would be dying more than they would from climate change as a result of just starvation, lack of electricity, refrigeration, clean water. You know, we need electricity to have clean water. You know, without coal, we can't even drink. So our fossil fuels are intrinsic to our lives until we can evolve and adapt technology to overcome that. And that kind of brings me to the next little point here. I want to rebroadcast a TED Talk for you guys. It's 14 minutes and 24 seconds long. And the title of it is Climate Change is Happening. Here's How We Adapt by Alice Bowes Larkin. And this is a TED Talk, and I'm giving Ted all the credit. This is used as basically free information and all that kind of thing. I searched this. It said share freely, so I'm going to assume that I'm able to share this. So without further ado, I'm going to play that for you guys. And this is, again, Alice Bowes Larkin. And she's talking about how we can adapt to climate change, as well as some interesting facts and figures that she has about the state of the climate today. This is a smart lady, you know, and actually this brings me to one other little point, that in some ways I don't know that there's enough carbon in the ground to pump out into the atmosphere for long enough to actually literally destroy the planet. I think that we're already almost at peak oil now. I'd say they're saying within another 100 years, if we keep up like we are, we're going to be at 6 degrees hotter than we are right now. We're already plus 3 degrees Celsius warmer. So we'll be additionally another 3 degrees Celsius warmer. You know, that'll make summer days in the Midwest United States average 85 to 90 degrees every single day, and almost no rain. Look for the big desert in the middle of the United States. But on the other side, it's like, but we're running out of oil. So we're going to run out of oil well before 100 years from now. And we're going to have to reduce the amount we burn. As oil becomes rarer, it's going to become more valuable for things like medicines and plastics and other chemical processes, to where it's like, well, this stuff is too valuable to burn anymore. At which point, our carbon, well, we will adapt, okay? As soon as oil becomes too expensive to burn, we will spend that extra money on technologies to mitigate our issues with oil, i.e. find another way. So this is, again, Alice Bowes Larkin. Thank you, Ted, and thank you, Alice, and I'm going to play this now.
Over our lifetimes, we've all contributed to climate change. Actions, choices, and behaviours will have led to an increase in greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that that's quite a powerful thought, but it does have the potential to make us feel guilty when we think about decisions we might have made around where to travel to, how often, and how, about the energy that we choose to use in our homes or in our workplaces, or quite simply the lifestyles that we lead and enjoy. But we can also turn that thought on its head and think that if we've had such a profound but a negative impact on our climate already, then we have an opportunity to influence the amount of future climate change that we will need to adapt to. So we have a choice. We can either choose to start to take climate change seriously and significantly cut and mitigate our greenhouse gas emissions, and then we will have to adapt to less of the climate change impacts in future. Alternatively, we can continue to really ignore the climate change problem. But if we do that, we are also choosing to adapt to very much more powerful climate impacts in future. And not only that, as people who live in countries with high per capita emissions, we're making that choice on behalf of others as well. But the choice that we don't have is a no climate change future. Over the last 2 decades, our government negotiators and policymakers have been coming together to discuss climate change. And they've been focused on avoiding a 2 degrees centigrade warming above pre-industrial levels. That's the temperature that's associated with dangerous impacts across a range of different indicators to humans and to the environment. So 2 degrees centigrade constitutes dangerous climate change. But dangerous climate change can be subjective. So if we think about extreme weather event that might happen in some part of the world, and if that happens in a part of the world where there is good infrastructure, where there are people that are well insured and so on, then that impact can be disruptive, it can cause upset, it could cause cost, it could even cause some deaths. But if that exact same weather event happens in a part of the world where there is poor infrastructure, or where people are not well insured, or they're not having good support networks, then that same climate change impact could be devastating. It could cause a significant loss of home, but it could also cause significant amounts of death. So this is a graph of the CO2 emissions up the left-hand side from fossil fuel and industry, and time from before the Industrial Revolution out towards the present day. And what's immediately striking about this is that emissions have been growing exponentially. If we focus in on a shorter period of time from 1950, we have established in 1988 the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Rio Earth Summit in 1992. Then rolling on a few years, in 2009 we had the Copenhagen Accord, where it established avoiding a 2 degree temperature rise in keeping with the science and on the basis of equity. And then in 2012, we had the Rio +20 event. And all the way through, during all of these meetings and many others as well, emissions have continued to rise. And if we focus on our historical emission trend in recent years, and we put that together with our understanding of the direction of travel in our global economy, then we are much more on track for a 4 degree centigrade global warming than we are for the 2 degree centigrade. Now let's just pause for a moment and think about this 4 degree global average temperature. Most of our planet is actually made up of the sea. Now, because the sea has a greater thermal inertia than the land, the average temperatures over land are actually going to be higher than they are over the sea. The second thing is that we as human beings don't experience global average temperatures. We experience hot days, cold days, rainy days, especially if you live in Manchester like me. So now put yourself in a city centre. Imagine somewhere in the world, Mumbai, Beijing, New York, London. It's the hottest day that you've ever experienced. There's sun beating down, there's concrete and glass all around you. Now imagine that same day, but it's 6, 8, maybe 10 to 12 degrees warmer on that day during that heat wave. That's the kind of thing we're going to experience under a 4-degree global average temperature scenario. And the problem with these extremes, and not just the temperature extremes, but also the extremes in terms of storms and other climate impacts, is our infrastructure is just not set up to deal with these sorts of events. So our roads and our rail networks have been designed to last for a long time and withstand only certain amounts of impacts in different parts of the world. And this is going to be extremely challenged. Our power stations are expected to be cooled by water at a certain temperature to remain effective and resilient. And our buildings are designed to be comfortable within a particular temperature range. And this is all going to be significantly challenged under a 4-degree type scenario. Our infrastructure has not been designed to cope with this. So if we go back also thinking about 4 degrees, it's not just the direct impacts, but also some indirect impacts. So if we take food security, for example, maize and wheat yields in some parts of the world are expected to be up to 40% lower under a 4-degree scenario. Rice up to 30% lower. This will be absolutely devastating for global food security. So all in all, the kinds of impacts anticipated under this 4 degrees centigrade scenario are going to be incompatible with global organized living. So back to our trajectories and our graphs of 4 degrees and 2 degrees. Is it reasonable still to focus on the 2-degree path? Well, there are quite a lot of my colleagues and other scientists who would say that it's now too late to avoid a 2 degree of warming. But I would just like to draw on my own research on energy systems, on food systems, aviation, and also shipping, just to say that I think there is still a small fighting chance of avoiding this 2-degree dangerous climate change. But we really need to get to grips with the numbers to work out how to do it. So if you focus in on this trajectory and these graphs, the yellow circle there highlights that the departure from the red 4-degree pathway to the 2-degree green pathway is immediate. And that's because of cumulative emissions, or the carbon budget. So in other words, because of the lights and the projectors that are on in this room right now, the CO2 that is going into our atmosphere as a result of that electricity consumption lasts a very long time. Some of it will be in our atmosphere for a century, maybe much longer. It will accumulate, and greenhouse gases tend to be cumulative. And that tells us something about these trajectories, because first of all, it tells us that it's the area under these curves that matter, not where we reach at a particular date in future. And that's important because it doesn't matter if we come up with some amazing whiz-bang technology to sort out our energy problem on the last day of 2049, just in the nick of time to sort things out. Because in the meantime, emissions will have accumulated. So if we continue on this red 4-degree centigrade scenario pathway, the longer we continue on it, that will need to be made up for in later years to keep the same carbon budget, to keep the same area under the curve, which means that that trajectory, the red one there, becomes steeper. So in other words, if we don't reduce emissions in the short to medium term, then we'll have to make more significant year-on-year emission reductions. We also know that we have to decarbonise our energy system. But if we don't start to cut emissions in the short to medium term, then we will have to do that even sooner. So this poses really big challenges for us. The other thing it does is it tells us something about energy policy. So if you live in a part of the world where per capita emissions are already high, it points us towards reducing energy demand. And that's because with all the will in the world, the large-scale engineering infrastructure that we need to roll out rapidly to decarbonize the supply side of our energy system is just simply not going to happen in time. So it doesn't matter whether we choose nuclear power or carbon capture and storage, upscale our biofuel production, or go for a much bigger rollout of wind turbines and wave turbines. All of that will take time. So because it's the area under the curve that matters, we need to focus on energy efficiency, but also on energy conservation. In other words, using less energy. And if we do that, that also means that as we continue to roll out the supply side technology, we will have less of a job to do if we've actually managed to reduce our energy consumption, because we will then need less infrastructure on the supply side. Another issue that we really need to grapple with is the issue of well-being and equity. There are many parts of the world where the standard of living needs to rise. But with energy systems currently reliant on fossil fuel, as those economies grow, so will emissions. And now if we're all constrained by the same amount of carbon budget, that means that if some parts of the world's emissions are needing to rise, then other parts of the world's emissions need to reduce. So that poses very significant challenges for wealthy nations, because according to our research, if you're in a country where per capita emissions are really high, so North America, in Europe, in Australia, emission reductions of the order of 10% per year and starting immediately will be required for a good chance of avoiding the 2-degree target. Let me just put that into context. The economist Nicholas Stern said that emission reductions of more than 1% per year had only ever been associated with economic recession or upheaval. So this poses huge challenges for the issue of economic growth. Because if we have our high carbon infrastructure in place, it means that if our economies grow, then so do our emissions. So I'd just like to take a quote from a paper by myself and Kevin Anderson back in 2011, where we said that to avoid the 2-degree framing of dangerous climate change, economic growth needs to be exchanged, at least temporarily, for a period of planned austerity in wealthy nations. This is a really difficult message to take, because what it suggests is that we really need to do things differently. This is not about just incremental change. This is about doing things differently, about whole system change, and sometimes it's about doing less things. And this applies to all of us, whatever sphere of influence we have. So it could be from writing to our local politician, to talking to our boss at work, or being the boss at work, or talking with our friends and family, or just quite simply changing our own lifestyles. Because we really need to make significant change. At the moment, we're choosing a 4-degree scenario. If we really want to avoid the 2-degree scenario, there really is no time like the present to act. Thank you. Thank you.
Alice, basically what you're saying, the talk is, unless wealthy nations start cutting 10% per year the emissions now, this year, not in 2020 or 25, we are going to go straight to the 4+ degrees scenario. I'm wondering, what's your take on the cut by 70% for 2070?
Yeah, I mean, it's just nowhere near enough to avoid 2 degrees. I mean, one of the things that often, when there are these modelling studies that look at what we need to do, is they tend to hugely overestimate how quickly other countries in the world can start to reduce emissions. So they make kind of heroic assumptions about that. And the more we do that, because it's the cumulative emissions that matter, it's the short-term stuff that really matters. So it does make a huge difference. If a big country like China, for example, continues to grow even just for a few extra years, that will make a big difference to when we need to decarbonise. So I don't think we can even say when it will be, because it all depends on what we have to do in the short term. But I think we've just got huge scope, and we just don't pull those levers that, you know, allow us to reduce the energy demand.
Thank you for coming to TED and sharing this. Thank you.
So that was from a TEDx talk in London in October 2015. And here we are at 2018, getting close to that 2020 mark that the gentleman just referenced. And our global emissions of carbon are continuing to rise exponentially. And she makes some very good points in this talk. You know, she kind of does talk about the inevitability of it. I think she exchanges inevitability with extreme challenge. When she says it is going to be extremely challenging to reduce, let's say, North American emissions by 10% per year without destroying the economy by 10% per year, because the economy is directly tied to our carbon output. So as long as you have economic growth and prosperity, you're going to have a higher level of carbon dioxide output. And you will go towards that 4 degrees C, she said, increase. And that there seems to be a plateau level that is reached, a critical level, if you will. And that is in 2030 to 2040. So at that point, by the time we hit 2040, in 20 years from now, or 22 years from now, you know, by the time that children born this year are able to drink, we will see the snowball effect, I guess you could call it. I don't know what else to call it, of climate change, wherein you start getting negative feedback and other things happening in the environment that will rapidly accelerate it. Okay, and everybody, when they're, you know, one of the problems with trying to get people active on global nuclear issues is that it's not a direct thing. It's like, yeah, it's not going to give me cancer or my kids cancer. Maybe, probably not. That's the majority opinion of that. And so it's not an issue. You know, here we're looking at a situation where it's like, okay, and by the time the children born today are 21 years old, the global climate will be plus 2.5 to 3 degrees at this point, on its way to 4. In the next 60 years after that. And we will be at not at peak coal yet. We'll be able to keep doing coal for a long time, probably 100 years. Oil will run out quicker than that. And we haven't even thought about tapping the methane reserves under the Arctic ice caps. And as they melt, the Arctic methane deposits will become more available, and then they can start burning that. You know, and as well, keep in mind that methane in that process will escape, and when it does escape, methane has, I think, 5 times or 10 times or more the global warming impact that CO2 does. It's much more deadly to the climate that way. So, are we screwed, folks? Have we doomed ourselves in the next generation? I mean, think about it. 4 degrees C would mean that the United States becomes pretty much a desert. It's Arizona all the way from around the Great Lakes to probably the mountains of Oregon. And then on the other side, where I'm at now, it'll probably stay better, but it'll still be drier and it'll still be hotter. And there will still be massive loss of habitat. If you increase the temperature in Eugene, Oregon by 4 degrees Celsius, which is what, like between 6 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit, you're gonna change the entire ecosystem. A lot of these wonderful mosses and other cool moisture-loving plants that exist here just won't be able to live. It'll be too hot and too dry. They'll dry up, go away, and turn to dust. And they'll expend their carbon into the atmosphere and add to the problem. You know, I'm right now looking out my window in Eugene, Oregon, at a rainy sky. It's probably 35 to 37 degrees. Everything is green. Everything is alive. Everywhere I look, there's a plant. You know, and so if you were to increase the temperature, it would immediately stop raining, or rain much less. You know, and so a lot of these mosses, you know, half of the lawn here is actually moss. It's a pretty dark, bright yellow-green moss, and I'm sure the locals probably think it's ugly, but I think it's beautiful. It's like having a forest floor for a yard. So, I mean, it would literally destroy that. Now I'd have big dead patches in the yard where the moss can't live anymore because it's too hot. You know, and other invasive species would move in that can tolerate drier, warmer air, and it would change. Everything would change. When the plants change, the animals change. So we got to avoid this. But and here it is, and here's what I started talking about at the beginning. We can't. We cannot avoid it. You know, it is what it is. What we need to do is be willing to sacrifice. I think that's the point that I could take away from this, is that unless richer, more prosperous economies are willing to literally sacrifice their own growth, you know, so 10% economic growth equals 10% greater carbon output. Unless we're willing to curb that and get smaller despite a growing population. See what I mean? See, it's impossible. That's where you always get the catch up. It's that the more people you have, the more resources you need, the more energy you need, the more carbon you put out. It's exponential, and the more people equals more need. You know, yeah, we do waste a lot of electricity, for instance. You know, we're sit there in broad daylight with the light bulb on, or you know, turn on the computer and just turn off the monitor and let the thing run by itself for day after day without any use for it. All that kind of stuff. So even if you were to unplug every charger from every outlet that it's just permanently plugged into, you would save gigawatts of power. Just the little things we do, we don't even think about. Use energy. And when they use energy, they produce carbon dioxide, and that is the issue. So if we aren't willing to sacrifice, literally, our own lives, then we will literally not be able to do anything about this problem, and we will see 4 degrees warming. Excuse me, I'm sorry, folks. And 4 degrees doesn't sound like much until you think of it as Celsius, realize, oh, that's 12 degrees, and if it's on a hot summer day up in the 90s, if it's up in the 110s now, well, that's a different story, isn't it? You know, if there is no more snow in the winter, and it's too hot to rain now all the time. The moisture creates a bubble. The moisture just flies right up and over and around. You know, what are we going to do, folks? We have an issue. We're killing the oceans. We're killing the air. We're killing the land. And only through self-sacrifice